A very good morning to you on this second day of February. Believe it or not, 2026. If you've joined us, you've joined the Fifth Connection, a channel on which we talk you through the storyline of the scriptures. And this morning we are in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse number 10. War is big business. War is about killing. War is about defense. War is about protection. And the film industry captures this in many ways. They capture big screen battles, huge battles. You think of Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, a 1989 movie challenging racial tensions and police violence. Brutality. Cinema has long exposed social injustice and, of course, amplified the voices of those who've been pushed to the margins, the marginalized. But more than that, even fashion shows resistance on the runway. It's a different kinds of fashions make a statement. The suffragettes of the earlier 20th century wore white to show, of course, their purity and their fight for women's rights. You get defiance in dance, war and resistance through dance, and probably through every social medium, whether it's art, sculpture, poetry, yet resistance poetry that draws very strong battle lines between what is and what ought to be. The writer in the book of this letter to the church at Ephesus talks about synchronicity in the assembly, how that the body needs to move in a synchronous way, in sync with the one who's called them out of darkness into light, and then in sync with one another. And here in chapter 6, the writer starts out by talking about the field of relationality. There are relational varieties in this synchronicity, in this family called the assembly. We commonly call it church. And we've spent 2 episodes giving the backdrop to war. Paul starts out in 1 verse 1, setting the backdrop, the backstory to why he's going to talk about warfare in verse 6 to verse 20, and end off this letter that was read in the company of the committed. He talks about relational varieties, the field of relationality, where parent-child relationships exist, master-slave relationships exist, husband-wife relationships, and he's not exhaustive about the field of relationality here, but he mentions these categories to show that these household varieties, what is called household order, the Houstophilin texts, are the battle lines, are battle formations that the assembly engages in. Family is a battle formation. The assembly is a battle formation. Workspace is a battle formation. And how we engage in the fight is so crucial. So here I want to talk about the beauty of war. You would say, what's beautiful about war? How about collateral damage? There is always collateral damage in war. It's amazing when you watch the news how you see different sides of the aisle taking sides for and against the Palestinian situation, the Israeli situation, and every situation on the planet. And each one is pushing a narrative. Each one is pushing a storyline to convince the hearer. You listen to the Palestinian arguments and you don't know anything else, you will say, the Palestinians are right. You listen to the Israeli arguments at the expense of everything else or all other. Say the Israelis are right. And so we have propaganda all over the place. It's called fake news. So whether it's religion or politics, they use story because stories captivate minds. The writer in chapter 6, verse number 10, from verse 10 onwards, is going to talk about battle vigor. He's going to talk about contention. He's going to talk about what fight mode looks like in the assembly. Now, the first thing that you need to note is that for the assembly, fight mode is never physical. It doesn't end up in fisticuffs or murder or killing or slaughter if you apostatize. It's a spiritual war. That puts the whole frame of war in a different sphere, in a different realm. So that what you see is informed by what you can't see. So you better figure out who you're fighting against, what you are fighting for, and get a firm grip of that. Because verse 10 says, finally. Why does Paul say finally? Well, 5.5 chapters of pumping away at who we are, at heightening our awareness level, our consciousness level, that we have capability. And now in chapter 3, verse 1 to chapter 6, verse 24, we have capacity, a broadening capacity that is built off of a solid conscious awareness of who we are, what we call an onto-epistemology. The word ontos means being, B-E-I-N-G. It has to do with who I am and whose I am. Not who I am in and of myself and by my own efforts, but who I am in relation to the God of heaven. Paul says, finally, be strong in the Lord. Note, it's in the Lord, not be strong in your own energy, in your own ingenuity, in your own smarts. Be strong in the sphere of all causes, in the realm where causality exists. Every action is a cause and has an effect. Be strong in the Lord. It's being strong in a person, because in him, Acts 17, verse number 28, in him we live and move and have our being. All of God's creation, including men, women, and children, all of us exist inside of God. In him we live and move and have our being. And yes, follower of the way, that includes pagans. Paul is addressing the Stoics, the Greek philosophers and teachers in Acts 17. And he says, in him we live and move and have our existence. I can't explain all of the vicissitudes of that concept to you, but the text says so. The text has authority. It is, what does the text say? In him we live and move and have our being. So be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. This verse is talking about capacity. What is capacity? Quality of doing. A capacity to be able to do and to be. We need to have a growing capacity as believers to be what God has called us to be, to process more and more of life and living. But as we grow older, we seem to be having less and less capacity to process. And why is that? Well, the singular thing I want to suggest to you is that we died at 30 and we buried at 80. Because long, long ago, we stopped learning and we stopped growing and going. So we can't think straight anymore because we haven't taken time to have our minds exercised. Yes, it's called brain train. Have your brain trained, your mind exercised to discern what is apropos. And you may say, yeah, but I'm getting older. I'm not as sharp as I used to be. Well, that may be the case. Paul says the outer man is falling apart. It's coming unglued. But the inner man is being renewed day by day. Wonderful to meet older people, as sharp as a Gillette razor blade. Their Gillette edge has not blunted. Still as sharp. The other body's going. But some of us show all the signs of atrophy. Dead in the head and everywhere else. Capacity. That's what verse 10 is about. Finally, be strongly aligned in your inner man capacity. Be strongly aligned. Now, that's a wonderful word, but that word assumes so much. Let me give you a couple of things that this word assumes. Alignment assumes, are you listening? Hear me out now. Alignment assumes a line. Not just messing with words now. Alignment assumes a line. There is a line. There is a standard. When your wheel alignment on your vehicle is out, what does it do? It swerves to one side or another. But generally sticks to the side where the damage has been inflicted because you've gone over a curb or a bump. Alignment, number one, assumes a line. And number two, a line or a standard assumes a standard maker. A law or a principle assumes a principle or a law maker. All just from the word alignment. An alignment assumes a line, a standard, a law, a principle. And a standard, a law, or a principle assumes a law maker, a principle maker, a standard maker. And my standard, our standard as the believing community is God and what He has said in His Word. So we better get our lives in line with the Word, according to the line, the standard. What does the text say? Be strongly aligned in your inner man capacity. Be strong in the Lord and in the strength of His might. You have mighty power in you. That's not New Age. The text says, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of His might. And since He has taken up residence you, His power is accessible to you. Be strong in the Lord and in the strength of this inner capacity, this active power to fight. Because that's what the rest of the paragraph is going to talk about. It's war talk, men and women. It's corporate war talk. We don't fight as individuals. We fight as a group. We fight as an assembly. It is corporate fighting. And war is, listen to me now, war is what we need to be aware of. Spiritual war, as the next two verses is going to talk about. And you see, it's not content that just shapes a community. We are going to see that relationships and intimacy is what shapes the community. Because Paul has just spent chapter 5, from verse number 18 onwards, all the way to chapter 6, verse number 9, talking about relationality and intimacy in the field of relationality. Intimacy shapes community. Let me repeat that. Are you listening? Intimacy shapes community. It's not what you know, but it's your intimacy, which is informed by content. I'm not saying it's content-less or proposition-less, but it's intimacy that shapes community. My intimacy with my wife shapes my communion with her. I can know everything in the world there is to know, but I can still lack intimacy. Intimacy shapes the community. Be strong in the Lord, in the Lord. It's a relational thing. It's an intimacy thing. And in the strength of his might, be strongly aligned in your inner man capacity, which is active power to fight. We'll stop there. And for today, I challenge you to become consciously aware of the fact that your energy is tied to who you are in Christ. We are overcomers in Christ. We reign. We are seated with him in heavenly places. And that's where the battle rages. But it expresses itself on the earth physiologically. In my marriage, in my family, in the believing community, in the workplace, in the workspace. War has a frame to it. It has a rhythm to it, and it has a rhyme to it. And that's what we're going to be talking about over the next while. Be consciously aware that God has called you into a battleground, not onto a playground, but a battlefield. And that's where the war is raging. But he's equipped us to fight. Do you know what your equipment is for the fight? That's what we're going to talk about. I trust that as you go with God today, you will go into today with a consciousness of who he is and what he has done and what he desires to do on your behalf. So goodbye for now and have a good day.